Um, on June 19th, 2019, I was honored to testify before this committee as a witness for the hearing on the HR 40 and the path of restoration of justice. Little did I know that a little less than 2 years later, I would once again participate in this hearing of this subcommittee, this time as a member. I want to thank the ranking member Johnson for the honor of acting as ranking member for this hearing. And once again, thank Chairman Cohen, my fellow committee members, and invited guests for this opportunity to share my story with you today. Before I share my story, let me emphasize 3 points to help guide us through our discussion. First, let me reiterate that slavery was and still is an evil, whether it be the 83-year history of our nation or prior 3,000-year history or the presence around the world today. Incompatible with American ideals, we purge the stain from our nation's soul at the cost of 600,000 American lives. I'm a product of that evil practice. My great-great-grandfather, Silas, arrived here in the belly of a slave ship, sold to the Burgess plantation. He escaped through the Underground Railroad and died a successful entrepreneur. Built the first Black church, elementary, purchased 102 acres of farmland that he paid off in 2 years. Second, reparations is not the way to right our country's wrong. What I propose later will be more lasting. Third, it is impractical and a non-starter for the United States government to pay reparations. It is also unfair and heartless to give Black Americans the hope that this is a reality. The reality is that Black American history is not one of a hapless, hopeless race oppressed by a more powerful white race. It is instead a history of millions of middle and wealthy class Black Americans throughout the early 20th century achieving their American dream. We're discussing this morning the theory of reparation. It's nothing new. It's been tried over the last 100 years, resulting in the misery and death of over 100 million men, women, and children. It's called redistribution of wealth, or socialism. Instead of that theory, I'd like to share the reality of a race whose history of success in America has been stolen, and what we can do to repair that damage. I grew up in the Deep South, Tallahassee, Florida, in the 50s and 60s, the days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation. It was my community that was our nation's most competitive community. We believed and taught the love of God, country, family, respect for women and authority. We believed in commanding respect through meritocracy, not just in sports and entertainment, but in every discipline: math, science, exploration, innovation, farming, entrepreneurship. We had a reputation as a race for our courage and commitment. We led our country in the growth of the middle class during that period. Men matriculated from college. Men committed to marriage over 70%, and the percentage of entrepreneurs over 40%. Before we embraced the theory that real success was moving out of our community and integrating into white neighborhoods, businesses, and schools, our community turned within. I remember, as a young man, Perkins Service Station, Speed Grocery Store, Baker's Pharmacy, FAMU Hospital with only Black doctors and nurses, when 50 to 60% of Black Americans in the 60s nationwide lived the middle-class lifestyle. We were taught respect for our flag and raised by a generation of men who fought for it. They taught us that you can't demand or beg for respect. You can only command respect through meritocracy. We're taught pride in our history, both American and Black history. We're taught about Christus Addis, America's first freedom martyr in the Revolutionary War. This is Tuskegee Airmen, and over 100,000 Black men, including my father, who fought against the godless ideologies of Marxism, socialism, and communism. We were taught to recognize and appreciate progress. I entered the NFL in 1973. At a time, there were no Black quarterbacks, Black centers, or Black middle linebackers. They were a white thinking men position. 40 years later, our nation has elected a Black American as president and a Black female as vice president. It's called progress. Once we lose our history, we lose pride in our past, appreciation for our present, and the vision for our future. If we're sincere about repaying Black Americans for our loss, let's give us back our history. That includes the history of we the people, whose Judeo-Christian values have granted every generation the opportunity to look at each other better from inside out, not outside in. In doing so, you'll ensure pride within our race as we accept our lineage as victors, and the same history will command the respect from our fellow Americans, an example of how to overcome the most overwhelming odds. And the most important thing is that we realize the failure that's happening today is a failure not of the American system, not of free market, not of the faith, and the neighbor and the family system. It's a failure of policies. We have 75% of the Black boys in the state of California in 2017. They cannot pass standard reading and writing tests. We have 3 schools in Baltimore that have Black schools in Baltimore have zero proficiency and math. 10 years ago, we had 93% of the black teen males in Chicago unemployed. These are policies we can change, but we first need to recognize and understand the pride of my race, the pride of those who came before us, and that they cannot be forgotten or disappear because they worked too hard to command respect of our fellow Americans. I feel we do that. We change our policies so the Black American youth and generation can take advantage of the same things that all other Americans can do so. Then we will take again our place as being one of the most impressive races in our nation. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Appreciate your opening statement. I hope you see my lapel pin here. Recognition of our Miami chair.
There we go.
Love of the cane. I now would like to recognize the chairman